the middle of a seemingly normal Thursday, when the last rays of autumn sunlight shone through the large glass windows of the shop, Claire was rushing down to arrange the silk scarves that had just arrived. The small boutique space that she had built with her own two hands always radiated elegance, with delicate hangers, high-end dresses that breathed under the lights, and a light, gentle scent of perfume wafting from the corner of the room. Gently, the phone vibrated in the spirit of payment. Claire looked at the screen. A message from Mark, her husband of 12 years, the man she had trusted and loved with all her heart. "I'm going to Miami with Melissa. I'm going to clean up our joint account. Good luck. Ha." Just a few sentences, but like a thunderclap in the clear sky. But Claire's hands did not tremble. Her eyes just paused silently for a second, then continued to arrange the scarves with her golden hands, as if she had not read that cruel message. Part of her heart was strong, but another part, the part that had been preparing for this day for a long time, was dangerous. "Mrs. Peterson, I think this turquoise scarf will suit you very well." Claire smiled gently as she returned to serving customers, her voice still warm and professional, as if the world was still spinning normally. When Mrs. Peterson walked out of the store, satisfied, the small silver gift in her hand, Claire let out a sigh. A long sigh that seemed to lighten her heart. She looked down at her phone screen. Mark's message still lit up, accompanied by the ha-ha emoji that seemed to add fuel to the fire. She opened her phone, typing slowly, each word, "If you love engaging, dramatic stories and thrilling cases, don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. Each video is a journey full of surprises, taking you into the world of unsolved mysteries. Join me in exploring, analyzing, and feeling every detail of the story. Good luck." It was that simple, no depth, no drag. Then she locked her phone, put the sedative back on. Claire returned to her office at the back of the store, where the corner of the wall was lined with boards with store expansion plans. Over the years, while Mark was constantly worried about bills, about her spending too much time on her tiny shop, Claire quietly built it into a high-end boutique that was the most loved by customers in the neighborhood. In fact, she had been preparing for this day for a long time. Mark had suggested many times to merge all of her assets, including the house she inherited from her grandmother, an old but sturdy house filled with childhood memories. But Claire always tried to delay because, deep down, she felt something was wrong. She remembered the times Mark came home lying that he had to go on a business trip, but the strange scent of perfume still lingered on his shirt. She remembered the times she caught him texting vaguely, then quickly turned off the screen when she entered the room. She remembered the time he came home with a brand new shirt, shiny leather shoes that his salary could not afford. Claire saw all those signs, but she chose to remain silent, not because she was weak, but because she was preparing for this day. 3 months ago, when she accidentally discovered the dinner bill for 2 at a 5-star restaurant, on the day Mark said he was busy with the competition, Claire knew for sure that she had to act. That night, she opened a separate account at another bank, transferring all of her personal savings account out of the joint account that Mark thought she controlled. And every time Mark transferred his salary into the account, Claire also cleverly kept a large portion of the revenue from the boutique in her separate account, so that the joint account had just enough balance so that Mark would not suspect anything. Now, looking back at the message Mark sent with his mocking tone, Claire just smiled. She thought he would cry, begging him to come back. He thought she would be disappointed when the joint account was reduced. But he didn't know. That account was just a trap she had prepared for him to tie himself up. She picked up the phone, the number of lawyer Lisa, who had accompanied her in the Sound for the past 2 months. "Lisa, it's time. He's showing his cards." "You're ready, Claire?" "More than ever. Just proceed as planned. The papers are ready. I'll file for divorce tomorrow morning, and we'll freeze any accounts Mark doesn't have." Lisa's voice was calm, decisive. Another message from Mark rang out. "Don't even try to beg. I'll let you stay in the house until we find a new place. Don't even dream of keeping that shop. I'll take half the money." Claire shook her head, smiling slightly. The house was hers, under her grandmother's name, unrelated to the marriage. The shop? It was also hers, established before marriage, with clear papers. You have no idea how strong I am, do you, Mark? Claire whispered to herself. At the end of the day, Claire made herself a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the window watching the sparkling city lights. Outside, the cold wind of late autumn blew by, but her heart was warm, not because of victory, but because she knew that a new life, a new chapter, was waiting for her ahead. Mark might laugh, ha ha, in the message, but the last one who would laugh was Claire. Tomorrow, a legal battle would begin, but Claire knew she was ready for it all. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Claire woke up early, made herself a cup of hot coffee, and stepped out onto the porch. Her grandmother's old wooden chair was still there, where she used to sit and listen to her tell her about the difficult years and the lessons of women's financial freedom. Now, those old words of advice were the strongest weapon protecting her from the storm. Outside, the autumn sky was mild. Yellow leaves were falling sparsely on the porch, but in Claire's heart, a real storm was starting. She took a sip of coffee, telling herself, "You have to stay strong. This is the time for me to prove that I am stronger than they think." The phone rang with lawyer Lisa on the other end, her professional voice now sounding warm. "Claire, I filed for divorce this morning. We're asking for an emergency order to freeze the remaining accounts and to stop Mark from spending any more. The court will consider it within 24 hours. "Thank you, Lisa. I know he won't give up easily, but I believe in you," Claire said, her eyes shining with determination. Lisa paused, then said softly, "Claire, I want you to know that you did everything you could to protect yourself. Not everyone is sane enough to prepare like that. Maybe because I saw this day coming." Claire sighed, remembering the nights she spent quietly gathering evidence, receipts, text messages, the lies she'd recorded of Mark. All of them were now perfect pieces to paint a true portrait of the man she once called her husband. When she entered the store, Claire was ready for the day, but a surprise awaited her. The young employee, Emma, looked at her with a worried look. "Miss Claire, I know about it. Mark and that girl. I heard about it from my friend, someone who works at Mark's place." Claire raised her eyebrows, a little surprised, but smiled gently. "Yes, it's true. But you're fine. You've been prepared for a long time." Emma gently held Claire's hand. "I just want you to know we're always by your side. This store is my second home, and I believe you'll get through it all." The simple yet powerful words made Claire's nose sting. Yes, she wasn't completely alone on this journey. Around noon, while Claire was entertaining customers, an elderly woman appeared at the door of Helen, Mark's mother. She looked tired, her eyes red. "Claire, I heard about it. Mark said he took all the money and ran away with that girl." Her voice trembled. Claire invited her inside, pouring her a cup of hot tea. Part of her wanted to slam the door shut, but the other part of her knew that Helen was just a grieving mother. "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't know Mark would do that. He did something terrible. I didn't stand by him," Helen said, taking Claire's hand, her eyes sincere. Claire was silent for a moment, then softly said, "Thank you, Helen. I don't blame you, but I have to protect myself, and I will to the end." At the end of the day, when the store was closed, Claire sat in the small back room, looking at the plans for the expansion of the boutique that she had cherished for so long. Mark had thought that taking all the money and leaving would make her collapse, but he forgot that Claire was a warrior, someone who had gone through loss and hardship to build this business from scratch. In Claire's mind, the plan for the next battle was slowly taking shape. Tomorrow, Mark would receive a court order, but that was only the beginning. And Claire knows, with wisdom and preparation, she will not only protect what is hers, but also restore justice. In the middle of the silent room, the soft yellow light shone on Claire's calm but resilient face. She picked up her cup of tea and smiled. "You'll see, Mark. You'll see how strong I am." The next morning, when the fragile sunlight just shone through the glass windows of the warm house, Claire sat at her desk, preparing for the real battle. In front of her was a thick stack of papers containing the evidence she had been quietly collecting for nearly a year. Every blurred invoice, every random message from Mark was now as valuable as gold in her hands. Now it's time to pay back everything you've sown. Eau Claire thought to herself, her eyes shining with a hardness mixed with a deep sadness that only those who had suffered betrayal could understand. When the clock struck 9 o'clock, she and lawyer Lisa met at the law office, a bright but warm room, a complete contrast to the coldness that Mark had left in their marriage. Lisa greeted Claire with a firm handshake, her eyes full of respect. "Claire, I have to say, you are one of the best prepared clients I have ever met. You not only defend, but also have the tools to fight back strongly." Claire smiled faintly. "Maybe because I have lived with that man long enough to know, when the day he betrays, what I will need to protect myself." Lisa nodded, began to open the file. "First, we will send an emergency order to freeze the remaining account. Seize Mark's personal assets, especially the money he just stole from the joint account." In the afternoon, when Claire returned to the store, she saw Tom, Mark's close friend and also a family friend, standing at the door. Tom scratched his head, looking at Claire apologetically. "Claire, I don't know what to say. I heard about it from Mark, but maybe I need to hear it from you." Claire looked up, looking straight into Tom's eyes. "What don't you know, Tom? He left me, went with that girl, and took all the money." Tom sighed, his voice dropping. "Mark said you were controlling. Didn't understand his dream, but he didn't tell about taking the money or about that girl." Claire nodded, calmly, because he didn't want anyone to know his true face, but now everyone will see. Tom was silent for a moment, then said, "Claire, I'm on your side. If you need a testimony or anything, just say it." Claire smiled for the first time in many days. "Thanks, Tom. Maybe I'll need you." That evening, while Claire was reorganizing her booth, her phone rang. Her lawyer, Lisa, had good news. "The court has just approved an emergency order. Mark's account has been frozen and his luxury car has been seized to cover the illegal withdrawals." Claire was silent for a few seconds, then let out a sigh of relief. "Great. At least he won't be spending all his money on frivolous things anymore." Lisa added, "And he has a court order. The official trial date will be announced next week. Get ready, Claire. This battle has just begun." As night fell, Claire sat back on her grandmother's old chair. She held a cup of hot tea in her hand, her eyes looking at the dim lights of the distant streets. In her heart there was not only pain but also a growing strength. She remembered the images of women like her mother, her grandmother, who had suffered without speaking up. But Claire was different. She would be the one to speak up, to stand up, to protect herself. In the dim light of the evening, Claire smiled. A strong smile, no longer afraid. The next morning, Mark woke up in a makeshift hotel room in a strange place, lacking the luxury he had promised his young girlfriend, Melissa. Yesterday, they had both dreamed of sunny days at Miami Beach, but today, that dream had gone up in smoke. The phone in Mark's hand vibrated continuously. The bank notification appeared coldly and cruelly. "Your account has been frozen by court order." He threw the phone on the bed, his eyes flashing with panic. Melissa came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, looking at him in confusion. "What's wrong, honey?" Mark scratched his head, no longer the confident man he once was. "The bank? The bank has locked the account. All the cards are unusable." Melissa blinked, her initially innocent expression quickly turning into suspicion. "What do you mean? What about the money for the trip?" Mark avoided her eyes. I'll take care of it. It's just a technical problem." But he himself knew it wasn't a technical problem. It was a direct blow from Claire, the wife he thought he could easily throw away. Unable to bear it any longer, Mark called Claire directly. His voice was full of anger but mixed with fear. "What the hell did you do, Claire? You have no right to freeze my account." On the other end of the line, Claire sat in her boutique office, calm as if this was just a call to order. "I'm only doing what the law allows to protect my part. and to protect what you haven't had time to take away, Mark. Mark gritted his teeth and shouted, I'll sue you. I'll take half of that store, half of that house, and you'll have nothing left. Claire smiled faintly, her voice low but cold as steel. Have you forgotten, Mark? The store is in my name. The house was left to me by my grandmother. And the evidence of your illegal withdrawals, using a joint credit card to travel with? Melissa? The court will love that, honey. Mark was stunned. The last sentence was like a knife piercing through the confident coat he tried to wear. As for Claire, when she hung up, she thought to herself, the war has begun. Back at the hotel, Melissa stood with her arms crossed, looking at Mark with cold eyes. You said you would take me to Miami, promised me a luxury apartment, a dream vacation. Now what? Mark tried to salvage. It's just temporary, I'll take everything back. But Melissa was different. The young girl began to realize that the successful man she admired turned out to be a bankrupt, lying man. You told me to quit my job, to believe you. What do I have left now? Mark tried to hug her, but Melissa backed away. Maybe Claire is right. Maybe I'm just a loser, Mark. The news of Mark running away with his girlfriend, withdrawing all the money, and being legally attacked by his wife quickly spread to his family. That morning, Mark's mother, Linda, called Claire. Her voice was old, weak but sincere. Claire, I'm sorry. I didn't know he would do that to you. I didn't expect he would do that to the whole family. Claire softened. I understand, Mom. It's not your fault. But this time, I won't give in. Linda's voice dropped, sounding like the sigh of a mother who was both disappointed and heartbroken. If you need help, I'm here. Just know, I've always considered you my daughter. Claire's words made her tear up, but she kept her voice steady. Thank you, Mom. Maybe I'll need you to testify when things go to court. Before Mark could recover, another message came from the company where he had been a middle manager for the past 7 years. Mark, due to your personal behavior that seriously affected the company's reputation, your employment contract will be terminated starting next week. Please pack up your personal belongings. Mark fell silent, his face pale. The promise of a solid career that he had boasted to Melissa had also collapsed. At the store, Claire was preparing for a meeting with the lawyer to complete the counterclaims, with the evidence printed out and neatly arranged. Every mocking text message from Mark, every time he called her old or useless, now became sharp evidence. Lisa looked at the pile of documents and nodded. Mark will have to kneel down and beg for mercy when faced with these things. He thought he was robbing her, but he didn't know that she was the one who controlled this game. Claire smiled, the smile of a woman who had fallen but stood up stronger than ever. On the first day of court, the atmosphere was as tense as a string. Claire stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cream-colored vest that her grandmother had left her as a symbol of the strength and pride of the women in her family. Her hands gently smoothed the folds of her dress, but the eyes in the mirror were cold and determined. Today, she would face the man who had trampled on her trust, no longer the resigned wife she had been. Lisa, standing next to her, whispered, "Today, Mark will see a Claire he has never known." Claire smiled slightly, but her eyes were hard. "And he will regret looking down on me." On the other side of the courthouse corridor, Mark entered, accompanied by an old lawyer he had hired in a hurry when he knew he was about to be countersued. No longer in his shiny suit, today Mark wore an old suit, his face gaunt, his eyes vacant. Melissa did not appear. Although Mark looked around for her, the young woman he had thought he would start a new life with had abandoned him as soon as his money ran out. Mark suddenly felt the room become stuffy, especially when he saw Claire enter, each step strong and confident, as if she was the one in control of everything. The trial began. The judge was a woman in her 60s. Her sharp eyes scanned the case file. She looked at Mark, then turned to Claire as if she had read what was going to happen. "The trial begins. The case is between Miss Claire Jennings and Mr. Mark Jennings. The legal representative please begin." Claire, Lisa's lawyer. Your Honor, today we will prove that Mr. Mark Jennings not only seriously violated the financial agreements, but also deliberately misappropriated assets, deceived his wife for many months, and now claims ownership of what does not belong to him at all. The courtroom fell silent as Lisa held up the thick file, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. We have it all: bank statements, text messages, receipts, evidence of unauthorized withdrawals, and even evidence from Mark Jennings' girlfriend's social media, proudly showing off trips funded by stolen assets. Mark's face paled. He turned to his lawyer and whispered, "They can't have those messages." Mark's lawyer tried to stay calm, but Claire could see the worry in his eyes. Claire stood up in her turn, her voice not trembling but steady, decisive. "Your Honor, I loved and trusted my husband. But after all the nights of waiting for him, when he didn't come home, after all the money disappeared from my account without explanation, I realized that I needed to protect myself." She opened the file. "I have a statement of all the withdrawals he made from our joint account to travel with other people. Here is the text message he sent me, admitting it, along with insults about my age, and, Your Honor, I have kept all the paperwork to prove that the house and the boutique were separate assets in my name before the marriage." The judge flipped through the file, his eyes lingering longer on the evidence of the withdrawals and hotel receipts. All of these extravagant purchases were made just weeks before Mr. Mark filed for divorce, the judge asked, his voice sharp. "Yes, Your Honor. He withdrew all the money to start a new life with his young girlfriend," Claire replied without blinking. When it was Mark's turn, his voice sounded choked. "Your Honor, I just want a fresh start. Claire, she doesn't love me anymore. I feel abandoned." The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Mark, that doesn't give you permission to steal from the community, and especially from your wife's separate property, and spending that money on another woman is inexcusable." Mark sweated, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. But no one was on his side. At that moment, Mrs. Linda, Mark's mother, who had called Claire, suddenly appeared in the courtroom, and when the judge asked if anyone wanted to testify, she stepped forward. "I am Mark's mother, but today let me be honest. Claire took care of my family and Mark himself. I apologize to my daughter-in-law for what my son did. My family stands by Claire." Mark sat there, speechless. Claire walked out of the courtroom to the murmurs of the onlookers. In front of the court, her friends and loyal clients from her boutique were waiting, clapping their hands in encouragement, as if they knew she had just represented betrayed women all over the world. But as the sun shone on her face, Claire knew the battle was far from over. She had just won a round, but Mark was not the type to give up easily. And then, the storm arose, from where Claire least expected it. 2 days later, while she was sorting out the papers at the boutique, Claire's phone suddenly vibrated with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Claire, it's me, Melissa." The atmosphere in the room seemed to sink. Claire gripped the phone tightly, her voice cold. "What else do you want?" On the other end of the line was a sigh, choked. "I need to see you. Please. I know I'm not worthy, but there are things you need to know." Claire paused. Her sharp instincts as a woman who had been betrayed made her realize. Melissa was scared. Very scared. Part of her wanted to hang up, but another part urged her to find out the whole truth. "I'll give you 30 minutes. Meet me at the coffee shop next to the boutique." "Don't be late," Claire said, then hung up, half skeptical, half curious. When Claire arrived at the shop, Melissa was sitting there, her eyes red, her hair disheveled, a far cry from the arrogant young woman who had walked beside Mark. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Melissa began, her hands clasped together and trembling. "But I don't know who else to tell." Claire sat down, looking straight at the young woman, her eyes sharp but calm. "You have 5 minutes to explain why I should listen to you." Melissa bit her lip, then hurriedly opened her bag and took out a phone, full of recordings and messages. "Mark, he didn't just want to leave you for me. He had a plan. He once said he would marry me to keep your boutique, then find a way to force you to sell it back to him at a cheap price. He's just using me as a tool. Claire raised her eyebrows, but her heart suddenly turned cold when Melissa opened the recording. Honey, let her think you're my new love. When it's done, I'll have half the store and we can enjoy it. Women like Claire always think they can control everything. Mark's voice rang out clearly on the recorder. Claire felt her chest tighten, not because of pain, but because of anger. Melissa looked up at Claire, tears rolling down her face. I'm stupid, I know, but I didn't think he was that cruel. When he ran out of money, forced me to borrow money to help, even suggested that I sell the gifts he had given me, I realized his true colors. Claire was silent for a long time, then spoke softly, her voice solemn. You know what you have to do, right? Melissa nodded. I will testify for you. I still have all the messages and recordings. I just ask you not to let me be dragged into him. I was wrong, but now I want to make it right. Claire looked at the young girl, for the first time seeing a real person behind the flashy and immature appearance. If you're honest, I'll give you a chance, but just once, Melissa. Just once. Right after the meeting, Claire immediately called lawyer Lisa. Lisa, we have a new witness and more recordings. Great, this'll be the final blow to Mark. He won't be able to withstand it. Jonathan asked her to meet the legal team tomorrow to prepare for the next trial. Now they had a living witness, evidence that Mark had intentionally deceived them. Claire smiled coldly, her eyes shining with determination. Mark thinks he's smarter than me, but he forgot. I always know how to wait for the right moment to strike the strongest blow. That night, sitting alone, looking out the window at the city lights, Claire sighed, but it was a sigh of someone in control. She picked up a glass of red wine, clinking it lightly with herself. For the greatest lesson of my life, Mark, and for all the women out there who are being looked down upon. Outside, the early winter wind began to blow strongly, as if signaling the greatest storm was coming, not for Claire, but for Mark. That day, the courtroom was packed with curious and eager eyes. The media, Claire's acquaintances, and even her longtime clients came to witness the moment they believed was justice served. Claire entered, wearing a dark blue suit, neat but full of power. Her posture was straight, her eyes were determined. No longer the wife who had silently endured. Today, Claire entered the courtroom like a warrior, ready for the final battle. On the other side, Mark sat with his lawyer, his face tense, completely different from the complacency of previous trials. He no longer smiled, no longer glanced at Claire with contempt, because he knew something big was about to happen. The gavel rang out loudly. The trial begins. Today, we will continue to argue the request for division of assets, as well as the allegations related to financial fraud. Claire's lawyer, Jonathan Miller, stood up. Your Honor, today I would like to call a new witness who has just come out after understanding the nature of the incident. I would like to invite Ms. Melissa Turner. The whole courtroom held its breath. Mark's face paled. He turned around abruptly, his eyes wide as if he could not believe his ears. Melissa, in a simple dress, stepped onto the witness stand, no longer the proud young girl she used to be. Instead, she was a mature girl, her eyes determined. After taking the oath, Melissa took a deep breath. I am here to tell the truth about Mark Harrison, the man I mistook as someone who loved me. But in fact, he took advantage of both me and his wife Claire. The room was in an uproar. The judge signaled for order. Mark approached me when I was a young receptionist who didn't know much about life. He promised me everything, a rich future, a house, a car, traveling everywhere. But what I didn't expect was that from the beginning, he used me as a cover for his plot to seize his wife's assets. Mark jumped up. You're lying, but the judge banged his gavel and warned, Mr. Harrison, sit down. If you interrupt the witness again, I will force you to leave the courtroom. Melissa continued, her voice loud. I have recordings, text messages, emails, everything that proves that Mark had planned for a long time to withdraw money, take over his wife's boutique and house. He used to say, if Claire's goes bankrupt, I will have everything. When I started to protest, he threatened to leave me without giving me a penny. Lacey handed the USB to the judge. Your Honor, these are the recordings and messages provided by Ms. Melissa Turner, confirming your testimony. Mark's voice rang out through the loudspeaker. As soon as you sign, I will make Claire sell the boutique for a pittance. You just need to stay with me. Everything after that is yours and mine. Then, Claire never expected to be kicked out of her own house. Who would want a woman over 40? The whole courtroom was silent. Claire looked down at her hands, clenched them tightly, but her face no longer trembled. She knew. Now the truth had won. Mark's lawyer tried to argue. Miss Turner, could it be that you were making up stories to get revenge on my client after the relationship broke down? Melissa shook her head. No. If I wanted revenge, I would have kept quiet and let him ruin his life. But I can't let a good woman like Claire suffer any longer. Claire raised her head, her eyes met with Melissa's. For the first time, it was a sympathy between two women who had been victims of the same scammer. The judge nodded thoughtfully. With the clear evidence and convincing testimony, I temporarily ordered the suspension of all requests for division of assets by Mr. Mark Harrison. All assets, including the store and house, will continue to be the sole property of Ms. Claire Harrison until a final conclusion. The whole courtroom burst into small applause, as if in admiration for Claire. Mark bowed his head, sweat beading, knowing that everything was over for him. When leaving the court, Claire stood in front of the large door, her head held high, the sunlight shining on her hair, as if affirming the victory for the woman's resilience and intelligence. A reporter approached. Miss Claire, do you have any message for other women who are in the same situation as you? Claire smiled softly. Always believe in yourself, and never let anyone underestimate you. Prepare carefully, write everything down. In the end, the truth will speak. As she got into the car, Claire's phone vibrated with an email from the lawyer. We can continue to push Mark into criminal liability. Do you want to pursue it to the end? Claire looked out the window, a half smile. We will not stop halfway until he has received enough price for his betrayal. After the court session that day, Mark almost disappeared from all contact. Old acquaintances said he hid, no longer dared to face anyone, and news of his bankruptcy began to spread throughout town. But for Claire, this battle was not over. She knew clearly that the damage Mark had caused was not only about money, but also about her self-esteem, her honor, and the years she had sacrificed for an unworthy husband. She wanted to protect her own honor and that of other women who had been looked down upon like her. A few days later, Claire sat across from lawyer Lisa in her luxurious office. Claire's eyes were no longer sad, but determined. I want to go further, Jonathan. I want him to pay the full price, not just financially, but also his reputation, his social status. Lisa looked at her, nodded slightly. I understand. And fortunately, Mark left enough traces. We can proceed to file a criminal lawsuit for financial fraud, credit abuse, and personal fraud. Claire smiled lightly, but her eyes were sharp. Let's do it. I want him to understand. This time, he can't escape the consequences. That night, when Claire was taking inventory of the boutique's goods to prepare for a new promotion, the phone rang. Sister Claire, this is Laura, Mark's old friend. I heard what happened, and I think you should know more about this. Claire frowned. Go on. Laura hesitated and then said quickly, Mark used to borrow money from many people in his old group of friends, saying it was for business investment and promising huge profits, but then disappeared and didn't pay. We just thought he was in trouble. But now I understand, he is a professional scammer. Do you have any evidence? Claire asked, her voice cold. I have messages, emails, and a few others too. If you want, I can gather them together. I want to see you, the sooner the better. A few days later, Claire organized a meeting at a small but cozy coffee shop. It was not just a meeting, but a gathering of people who had been taken advantage of by Mark. Old friends, colleagues, even some business partners he had borrowed from but never paid back. Each person had a story, a pain, a debt that had not been collected. An older man sighed. I believed him, like I believed my own son. He said he needed money to save the boutique, to save his wife, but in fact he wanted to take his girlfriend out. Claire clenched her fists, but her voice was calm. I will not let him fool anyone else. I will make everything public and bring it to justice, but I need you all to speak up. Everyone nodded in unison. With the help of Lisa and Laura, Claire began to file a complaint with the local authorities, along with all the evidence that she and the group of victims had collected. The press began to get involved. A series of articles with the shocking title, "Husband Leaves Wife for Young Lover, Reveals His True Face as a Serial Fraud." On social networks, women everywhere shared Claire's story as a symbol of strength, intelligence, and justice. Claire's story is no longer a divorce. It has become a symbol of women who have been betrayed but know how to stand up for themselves. A week after the articles appeared, the police began an official investigation. Claire received a call from the police chief. "Ms. Claire, we have summoned Mr. Mark Harrison for questioning on charges of financial fraud. Do you want to attend the next hearing?" "Sure," Claire answered without hesitation. The day Mark was summoned, the news was all over the newspapers and television. His image was furtive, his clothes were disheveled, no longer the handsome man he used to be. Creditors lined up in front of the police headquarters, demanding their rights. Melissa was also present, publicly apologizing to Claire for the first time in front of the press. "I was a victim. Now I want to help Claire bring the truth to light." In an interview with a local TV station, Claire appeared elegant and strong. "I'm not fighting just for myself. I'm fighting so that other women understand that you can be betrayed, but you have the right to stand up and fight for justice." She smiled when the reporter asked, "And if there is anything you want to say to Mark?" "I want to thank him, because without that betrayal, I wouldn't know how strong I am. And I want to say, this time, you can't escape." One autumn morning, the city courthouse was packed. No one thought that the noisy divorce would lead to such a big criminal hearing. But now, Mark Harrison, the once confident, arrogant man, appeared in the dock, facing serious charges. Claire stepped out of the car in a neat navy blue suit, her eyes determined. Not only her, more than 10 of Mark's victims, those who were tricked into borrowing money and taking advantage of his trust, were also present, all standing behind her, as if to affirm, "You cannot run away from the truth." When Claire entered the courtroom, all eyes followed her. There were nods of agreement, smiles of encouragement. Melissa, the young girl who used to be Mark's mistress, sat in the front row, this time not to support him, but to tell the truth. The press, television, and even local women's groups were present. A sign hung in front of the court gate, clearly stating, "Justice for Claire, justice for the betrayed." The hearing began with the emotional testimonies of the victims. Mr. Roberts, an old friend of Mark's, said in a trembling but angry voice, "I lent Mark $50,000 because he said he wanted to invest to take care of his family, his wife and children. But it turned out that he took that money to take his girlfriend on a trip. When I asked, he just smiled faintly. 'It's just a small loan. Don't make a fuss.' A middle-aged woman, her eyes red, continued, 'He promised to open a business together and asked me to put all my savings in it. When I realized I was deceived, it was too late.' Each statement was like a knife cutting deep into the truth about Mark, causing him to bow his head and avoid everyone's eyes. When it was Melissa's turn to step forward, everyone fell silent. The young girl who used to be proud to be Mark's new love now looked tired and guilty. "Mark told me that his wife was cold, indifferent, and did not support him at all. I trust him. I think I'm his savior." Melissa looked at Claire with tears in her eyes and continued, "But the truth is, he just used me, just like he used everyone else. When I found out, he spent all the money, even wanted to borrow money from my parents to pay off his debts." The whole audience burst into an uproar of indignation. Claire sat silently, but in her heart she understood that Melissa was just another victim, caught up in the vortex of a cruel man. It was Mark's turn to face questions from the prosecutor. Mr. Mark Harrison, you admit that you used money from your ex-wife, friends, and lovers for personal expenses. Mark sweated, trying to avoid, I thought they helped me when I was in trouble. I didn't mean to deceive anyone. The prosecutor growled, whether you meant it or not, taking money and not returning it is still fraud. Do you want to object to the evidence of the money transfers, the messages that you admitted to misappropriating assets? Mark was silent, unable to answer. Suddenly, Claire stood up and asked permission to speak. The eyes of the courtroom turned to her, and her voice rang out firmly, but with emotion. Your Honor, I am not the first woman to be betrayed, but I hope to be one of the last, so that someone like Mark will not continue to hurt anyone. I stand here not just for myself, but for everyone who has been deceived. Mark, you can take my money, you can take my time, but you can't take my self-worth, and today I want everyone to know, we the women that betrayed will not be silent anymore. The courtroom fell silent. Many people wiped away tears. At the end of the trial, the judge made a strong conclusion. Mark Harrison, based on the irrefutable evidence, you are convicted of financial fraud, credit abuse, and personal fraud. I sentence you to 5 years probation, to repay all embezzled funds, and to be banned from participating in corporate financial activities for the next 10 years. Mark collapsed, unable to raise his head. The courtroom door closed behind Claire, but for her, it was not the end, but the beginning of a new journey. A journey without lies and suffering, but filled with strength and freedom. Walking out of the court, the warm sunlight shone on Claire's shiny auburn hair like a sign of rebirth. Around her were hundreds of eyes watching, admiring nods, and encouraging smiles from the women who had stood by her side in the unequal battle. The media, who once saw her as nothing more than a betrayed wife, now surrounded her with respectful questions. Claire, how do you feel after the trial? Do you have a message for other women out there? Do you intend to continue to work for women's rights? Claire smiled gently but confidently. I didn't think I would stand here as a winner, but today I stand here as a survivor and stronger than ever. I want to say to all the hurting people out there, you are stronger than you think, and you are not alone. In the immediate aftermath of the trial, newspapers, television shows, and social media were filled with Claire's images and story. Claire Harrison, the woman who stood up for her justice. From tears to courage, Claire's journey to take back her life. Many women's groups across the United States invited Claire to speak, sharing her journey from a seemingly weak woman, cheated on by her husband, to a strong, proud businesswoman. One of the first events Claire agreed to participate in was the Strong Women of America Forum in New York, where she stepped on stage in front of thousands of women of all ages who had lived in fear and trauma. When Claire took the microphone, her eyes lit up and she spoke with all her heart. The day he sent me that last message with those cruel words, I thought it was the end. But it turned out that was the beginning for me, the beginning of realizing my own worth, the beginning of walking without anyone to bring me down. I want to tell you that no matter what happens, never forget that you deserve the best. The whole audience burst into applause, tears, and empathy. Not stopping at the speeches, Claire started an organization called the Unbreakable Women Foundation to help women who have been mentally, financially, and emotionally abused. This organization provides free legal advice, personal finance classes, and entrepreneurship for women who have been betrayed or are in a marital crisis. One of the first programs Claire launched was the Betrayed Women Startup Fund, with the first $100,000 coming from her fashion store profits. They may lose everything, but I'm giving them a chance to start over, just like I did, Claire said at the launch of the fund. What moved Claire the most was not the applause from the crowd, but a phone call from her ex-mother-in-law, Evelyn, who had repeatedly criticized her in the past. Claire, I was wrong to believe Mark's lies. Thank you for showing us who he really is. I'm so proud of you. Her voice trembled, and for the first time in years, they had a conversation filled with honesty and compassion. Claire's fashion store, now more than just a place to sell clothes, became a symbol of resilience. Every day, strange women come to her, share their stories, ask for advice, and buy things that remind her, I deserve to love myself. Melissa, Mark's ex, also comes back into Claire's life, but no longer as a rival, but as a partner, a companion in Claire's project to help other women. Claire is sitting in her office, the late afternoon sunlight shining through the window blinds, illuminating the certificates, awards, and even the photo commemorating the opening of her third store. On her desk, a cup of tea is warming next to the brand expansion plans. Claire's life is now stable and even more brilliant than ever. Suddenly her phone vibrates. Looking at the screen, the name Mark appears clearly, like a ghost from the past. Claire frowned slightly, her heart filled with a myriad of emotions. It had been a long time since she had heard the voice of the man who had once been her world, and then the worst traitor in her life. After a moment of hesitation, she pressed the answer button, put the phone to her ear, and said calmly, "Hello." On the other end of the line, Mark's voice sounded hoarse and tired, completely different from the confident and arrogant voice of the past. "Claire, it's me. I need to talk." Claire was silent, waiting. "I don't know where to start. I was wrong. I lost everything, Claire. Melissa left me. My job is gone. My money is gone. I have nowhere to go." Claire closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Part of her felt sorry, but part of her felt relieved. "Really, Mark? But why did you come to me now?" Mark hesitated, his voice almost crying. "I just want to apologize. Want to ask you for help. Can you give me a chance? Can you take me back? You've always been a good person, Claire. You've always loved me." Claire smiled, her smile no longer sad but full of courage. "Mark, do you remember the day you sent me a message? When you said you emptied your account, went with that 20-year-old girl, left me with everything? Do you remember?" Mark was silent. "You laughed then. You said, I wouldn't be able to live without you. Do you remember, Claire?" "I know. I was stupid. I thought things would be different. I thought I would be happy, but now I realize you're the one who truly loves me." Claire stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights. She thought of the dark days she had gone through, the nights she had buried her head in her business files, the times she had pursed her lips to keep from crying when thinking about the future. "Mark, you're right. I loved you. I loved you so much that I forgot myself, but that was the old Claire." She turned around, her eyes sharp and determined. "And Claire now, she has stood up. She has gone through the pain you caused her. She doesn't need anyone to save her, doesn't need anyone to pity her. And certainly, she doesn't need someone to come back just because there's no way back." Mark's voice was urgent and pleading. "But Claire, I really regret it. I swear, if you give me a chance, I will make things right. I can't live without you." "You don't understand. Everyone has turned their backs on me. You're the last person I can turn to." Claire was silent, but in her heart, the calmness was still like a calm lake. She used to be afraid of feeling lonely, used to struggle in the darkness of betrayal, but now she knew she was strong enough to walk away without having to look back. "Mark, you say I don't understand. I understand better than anyone. I understand the feeling of being betrayed by the person you love the most, the feeling of standing in the middle of an empty house not knowing what tomorrow will bring. But you were the one who taught me that lesson." Claire sighed, her voice softened but still firm. "I forgive you, Mark. Not for you to come back, but for me to let go. I forgive to free myself. But if you want to come back, no. I won't give you that chance." On the other end of the line, Mark burst into tears. "Claire, please. I know I don't deserve it, but just help me this time. Mark, this last time, I advise you, learn to stand up from your own failures. I did it, and you have to learn to do it too. Don't try to cling to me, because I'm no longer a shadow for you to lean on." Hanging up, Claire felt a strange sense of relief, not because Mark had realized his mistake, but because she had finally said everything she had kept inside. She looked around the room filled with her own achievements, without the shadow of anyone else contributing. "I've walked past you, Mark. And now it's time for me to continue living. For myself. Holding a cup of tea, Claire returned to work, to the plans to expand the brand, to the new dreams that she knew for sure she could realize without anyone's backing. After her last phone call with Mark, Claire felt like she had closed an old chapter in her life. But what she didn't expect was that a new, more glorious chapter was waiting for her. A few weeks later, while she was busy checking out a new shipment of handbags for her third store, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello, this is Jennifer Morgan, producer of the national television show Women of Strength. We've heard about your inspiring story, Claire. I'd like to invite you to be a part of a special broadcast about women who have overcome adversity to succeed." Claire froze, her hands frozen in the pile of receipts. "What are you saying? I don't think I'm anything special." Jennifer smiled over the phone, her voice warm and determined. "Claire, your story has gone viral in the female business community. We've watched your store grow and how you dealt with your husband's betrayal, not just to survive but to succeed and be admired by others." It turns out that customers who have shopped at Claire's store have shared her story on social media, along with images of the store's products, bearing the message, "Strong women do not succumb to betrayal." Other women who have experienced the same pain as Claire have spread her story as a symbol of hope, courage, and resurrection. We want to hear you tell your story on television. It's not just about overcoming pain, but about how to rebuild your life from the ruins and stand up stronger than ever. The night before the shoot, Claire sat in her warm living room, which was once a place filled with tears, now a peaceful home. She looked at the photo of the first store opening day, remembering the difficult early days, the times when she felt like giving up, Mark's sarcastic words about the meaningless little store. Then she smiled, looked at the excellent business achievements hanging on the wall, her eyes shining with pride. "Mark once said I would never do anything without him. Yet today, I am preparing to go on national television, telling my own story, a story in which I am the main character, not dependent on anyone." On the day of filming, Claire appeared in an elegant suit, her face radiant but unable to hide her emotions. When the studio lights came on and the MC asked her, "What helped you get up from the pain of betrayal and mental bankruptcy?" Claire answered in a warm, emotional voice, "At first, I thought I had lost everything. But then I realized the most important thing I needed to keep was my self-respect and belief in myself. I understood that no one could save me but myself." The audience listened attentively as she recounted the story of the day she received the message that Mark had left, how she calmly handled everything to keep what belonged to her, and the journey of building the store from scratch. Many people asked me, "Claire, how do you not fall down?" My answer is, be prepared before life challenges you. Stay sober and don't let love make you forget yourself. As soon as the broadcast ended, thousands of messages, emails, and comments on social media flooded Claire's inbox. A woman from Texas wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to leave a husband who had hurt me for 10 years. Another from Florida wrote, "Claire, you not only saved yourself but many others like me. Thank you." Claire looked at those messages, tears silently falling, not of sadness, but of joy and gratitude. After the recording, producer Jennifer walked over, shook Claire's hand tightly. "You are not just a guest, Claire. You will be the new symbol of modern women that the show wants to accompany for a long time." Claire smiled, her eyes looking into the distance. "I thought that when Mark left me, that was the end. But today I realized, sometimes what seems to be the end is the most beautiful beginning." When Claire's Resilient Women broadcast ended, it seemed like all doors to the past had closed. But just a few days later, a phone call from the show's producer opened a new door, one that Claire herself had never expected. "Claire, I know this is a bold proposal, but we have an offer from Mark." The name made Claire silent for a few seconds. "Mark wants to be on the next season of the show to respond to your story. He said he wants to tell his truth." Jennifer, the producer, continued cautiously, "We want to ask your opinion. This is your chance to confront him if you want." Claire sat silently in the living room, which used to be her home, now only memories. She closed her eyes, her heart beating faster, but then she smiled softly, full of confidence. Okay, if he wants the truth, I'll give him the whole stage to tell it. And I have something to say too. That day the studio was packed with audiences. The news of Claire and Mark appearing together attracted a lot of attention from the media and the online community. Claire walked in a simple but elegant dress. Still elegant, but now her eyes were strong and steady. On the opposite side, Mark was already sitting, wearing a new suit, trying to hide the shabby appearance of someone who had fallen into a financial crisis, but his eyes showed uneasiness and worry. The audience fell silent as the studio lights came on. The host spoke up. "Thank you both for coming here today. Claire, last time you shared about your journey of overcoming betrayal and starting over. But Mark, you said you have a different story. What do you want to share?" Mark took the microphone, his hand shaking slightly but trying to stay calm. "I know I did bad things, but Claire didn't tell me everything. I felt abandoned in this marriage. She only knew about the store, about work. I was lonely." The audience murmured. Claire remained silent, her eyes still fixed on Mark, unblinking. Mark continued, his voice faltering. "I admit that I made a mistake in coming to that young girl, but I didn't think Claire would plan to take me down like that. I lost everything. I just want to be understood." The host looked at Claire. "Do you have anything to say, Claire?" Claire stood up, took the microphone, her voice calm but firm. "Mark, you're right about one thing. You lost everything, but not because of me. You lost everything because you chose to treat someone who loved you more than you loved yourself." She turned to the audience. "We loved each other. We built our dreams together. But when he started other relationships, when he used the last money in our joint account to run away with someone else, he chose to end that marriage." The audience fell silent. Many wiped away tears. "You say I'm cold because I'm busy with work. Yes, I was busy. Busy to keep my family together, to avoid living in poverty. While I worked day and night, you went out to dinner with another girl, used the money I earned to book a hotel room with her, and yet today you stand here, blaming me?" Claire paused, took a deep breath. "I'm not here to knock anyone down. I'm here to tell everyone who's listening. Women, we don't have to suffer betrayal in silence. We deserve respect and happiness." The studio erupted in applause. If anyone listening thinks they're not strong enough to move on, I'm here to tell you, you can. You're stronger than you think. Mark bowed his head, unable to say anything more. For the first time, he faced the consequences of his actions, with no room for excuses. The host concluded the recording. Today's story is not just about Claire and Mark, but also a message to everyone who has been hurt in love. You have the right to stand up and live the life you deserve. As Claire entered the backstage room, removing the small microphone still stuck to her shirt, she suddenly heard a soft knock on the door. Turning back, she saw Mark standing there, no longer the confident look of the man who once thought he was victorious, but a confused Mark with red eyes. "Claire, can I talk to you for a moment?" His voice was hoarse, as if he had tried very hard to say it. Claire looked at him, her eyes calm, but inside, her heart tightened. After all these years of living together, even though Mark had betrayed her, she never thought that one day he would stand in front of her like this. "What else can I say, Mark? Everything is so clear," Claire replied, her voice not cold but like a tired affirmation. Mark sighed, sat down on the opposite chair, tremblingly took out a carefully folded piece of paper. "I know. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to hear me one last time." Claire crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes not leaving Mark. She nodded slightly to signal him to continue. Mark opened his mouth, his voice trembling with regret. "Claire, I was wrong. I thought I was reliving my youth. Thought I could start over with a young girl, but I was wrong. Wrong to betray you, the only person who always believed in me and stood by me, even when I had nothing left." He choked up, quote, When I sat on the set, when I heard you speak in front of so many people, I realized I was the one who destroyed my family, the one who pushed the best woman in my life away." Claire looked at Mark, not interrupting. She let him continue, to hear him admit with his own mouth all the things she had known for a long time. Mark wiped his tears, turned the paper over. "I wrote these lines last night because I knew when I looked into your eyes, I wouldn't be able to say everything." In the letter, he recounted his regrets, the times he sneaked in at night to look at old souvenir photos, the times he saw Claire succeed, and his heart ached because he knew he was the one who pushed her there, not because of love, but because of betrayal. "I wish I had realized it sooner, but now it's too late. Claire, if you could forgive me even a little, I would be grateful for the rest of my life." Claire sighed. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city at night, brightly lit but also lonely. "Mark, you know. Maybe I used to want to hear these words from you, but not anymore." She turned around, her eyes both sad and determined. "I don't need an apology. What I need you couldn't give me. Loyalty and respect." Claire walked closer to Mark, her voice warm but firm. "You asked me if I could forgive? Yes, I forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean I forget. And forgiveness doesn't mean I'll come back." Mark bowed his head, as if accepting the truth. "I spent many years of my youth loving you, but now I choose to love myself. Choose a life that is not hurt by lies anymore." That night, Claire returned to the house where she had lived with Mark for many years, but this time, that house no longer reminded her of sad memories, but was like a private space that she could control. Entering the living room, Claire opened a bottle of wine that she had saved for a special occasion, and today, that special occasion was not to celebrate with anyone else, but to celebrate for herself. Drink up a glass, for freedom, for self-respect, for the woman who dared to stand up and not allow herself to be trampled, she told herself, smiling brightly for the first time after many months of depression. Not long after, Claire decided to expand her Silver Lining store, turning it from a small store into a chain of fashion stores with a strong personal mark. With her reputation, courage, and intelligence, she attracted more customers, including women who were like her, who had been hurt and now wanted to stand up and rebuild their lives. Silver Lining is not only a fashion store, but also a symbol of hope and strength. And when major magazines came to interview her, Claire did not hesitate to share her true story. The story of a woman who was betrayed but did not fall, but rose up stronger than ever. "I want my story to be a motivation for other women to understand, if I can do it, they can do it too," Claire said in an interview. 6 months later, when everything was stable, Claire accidentally met an old friend named Daniel. Daniel, a college friend, had a secret crush on her, but never confessed because Claire was already dating Mark. The reunion took place at a charity fundraising event that Claire participated in as a sponsor. "Claire, is it really you? I can't believe my eyes. You're getting more and more radiant." Daniel smiled, his eyes warm and affectionate. At first, Claire just thought it was simply meeting an old friend, but Daniel's kindness, sincerity, and warmth gradually made Claire's heart flutter. Unlike Mark, Daniel always knew how to listen and respect Claire, always reminding her that she deserved the best. The coffee dates, the charity trips together, the late-night conversations, all gradually connected two souls who were once hurt, but still yearned for love. Claire felt for the first time in years that she was loved for who she was, not for her looks or her career. One day, as Claire was preparing for the opening of her 4th store, she paused in front of the mirror for a long time. She looked at herself, a 38-year-old woman with all the wrinkles of time, but also the temperament of someone who has gone through storms. "This is Claire, a strong, independent woman who knows how to love herself," she whispered to herself, her eyes sparkling. And in her public appearance at the opening ceremony, Claire confidently wore a bright red dress, the color of courage and boldness. Finally, Claire has a message for all women who have, are, and may go through the same situation as she did. Never let anyone define who you are. You are not someone else's shadow. You are the light of your own life. Don't let old wounds hold you back. Get up, take a deep breath and move on. And if someone leaves you, thank them. Because of them, you know how strong you are. In today's society, unstable relationships, betrayals, and mental shocks are no longer rare. But what matters is not how we are hurt, but how we face and stand up. Claire's story is not just a personal story, but a warning to everyone, especially women in modern society. Never put all your finances in the hands of others. Claire did not let herself be pushed into a passive position. She proactively kept her assets separate, watched for signs of abnormality, and was ready to act when necessary. In modern society, women are no longer limited by the old stereotype that we can create our own careers, earn our own money, and be in control of our lives. Many women today are still financially dependent on their husbands or partners, which puts them at great risk of being betrayed or abandoned. Remember that financial independence is not just about money, but also about choice and respect. Modern society is still full of prejudices about age, appearance, and the position of women in marriage. Mark thought that Claire would collapse just because he ran after a younger girl, but Claire proved a truth. A woman's value is not determined by age or by a man. Too many people today are obsessed with seeking approval from others when your true worth lies in how you live, how you treat yourself, and how you bounce back after every fall. One of the most important lessons from Claire is always be prepared, even when things are going well. Modern society is full of ups and downs, from romantic betrayals to career and financial ups and downs. You can be betrayed by someone you love, lose your job suddenly, or face an unforeseen crisis. Always have a backup plan. Keep your finances separate. Accumulate evidence when there are signs of irregularity. Build your own career. Always have a plan to escape the worst-case scenario. Being prepared doesn't mean being skeptical. It's a smart way to protect yourself. Being betrayed is not the end. Claire doesn't sit around crying, doesn't seek revenge. She turned pain into motivation to become more successful, stronger. Modern society requires everyone to be able to adapt. You may suffer loss, you may be betrayed, but what matters is what you do next. Claire's story is an affirmation. No one can destroy you unless you allow them to. Have you ever experienced a shock like Claire? What did you learn from it? Share your story in the comments because who knows, your sharing may be a motivation for someone out there. If you find this story meaningful, click like, share, and subscribe to spread the power of resilient women. And if you want to continue following stories about strength, about how to rise from adversity, don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss the next video.